there. You've sent over some really fascinating stuff about REST and API design. This guide, A Guide to REST and API Design, starts off with a quote.
Okay.
It says, "If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail."
Interesting.
It's from a psychology book.
Oh, wow.
Which makes you think, what does psychology have to do with software?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right.
It really is all about perspective.
Okay.
Just like a psychologist needs different tools to treat their patients, developers need a whole bunch of different approaches for different problems.
So different tools for different jobs.
Exactly. REST is one of those tools.
Okay.
And it's become super popular for building web services these days.
So it's not just about building any web service, it's
Right.
about building them in this RESTful way.
That's right.
But before we get into the how, let's start with the what exactly is REST?
So REST stands for Representational State Transfer.
Okay.
And it's more of a design philosophy than a strict standard.
Gotcha.
Think of it like architectural guidelines for web services.
Okay.
It's a set of principles that help you make things flexible and scalable.
So it's not a rule book.
Right.
It's more like best practices.
Exactly.
And this guide lays out 6 key constraints.
Right.
Client-server, stateless, cache, uniform interface, layered system, and code on demand.
Wow.
That sounds a little intimidating, to be honest.
It does sound like a lot,
Yeah.
but it's actually a lot simpler than it sounds.
Okay.
All of these constraints are about making RESTful applications adaptable and efficient.
Okay.
Let's take statelessness, for example.
Okay.
Each request is self-contained.
Okay.
It's like when you order something at a busy coffee shop.
Yeah.
You give your order, they make your coffee, and you're done.
That's it.
That's it. There's no need to remind them who you are or what you like
Yeah.
every time you go.
So every interaction is independent,
Exactly.
which makes things a lot easier to manage,
Right.
especially when you think about something with millions of users like Twitter.
Exactly. Scaling becomes super easy because the server doesn't need to remember past interactions.
So that makes it really robust.
Exactly. RESTful systems are very robust and can handle a lot of traffic.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
This guide also talks about the difference between connectors and components.
Okay.
It's like saying that apples and oranges are both fruit,
Right.
but they're not the same thing.
Exactly. And understanding the difference is key to understanding REST.
Okay.
Components are like the internal parts of an application, like databases and file systems.
Okay.
And connectors, on the other hand, are how those components talk to each other and to the outside world.
Gotcha.
REST is really about standardizing those connectors.
Okay.
You can think of them like universal adapters.
So if the connector is standardized,
Right.
does that mean you can change the internal workings of the component?
Yeah.
Without messing up the whole system?
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Oh, cool.
That's the beauty of it.
Wow.
You can change databases, update code, even swap programming languages without breaking the system, as long as those connectors follow REST principles.
So you're future-proofing your application
Exactly.
in this crazy world of tech that's always changing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really flexible.
It is.
So the guide also gets into URIs and media types.
Okay.
Are those part of this whole standardized connector idea?
Absolutely. URIs are like URLs.
Oh, okay.
They're those unique addresses for resources on the web.
Gotcha.
And media types, on the other hand, are what tell the systems how to handle the data.
Okay.
You know, those file extensions like .pdf or .jpg?
Yeah.
They're like labels that tell your computer what to do with the file.
So URIs are addresses,
Right.
and media types are like the instructions for what to do with the information
Exactly.
at that address.
That's a great way to put it.
Cool. And then this guide also points out how important self-describing messages are in REST.
Yes, self-describing messages are very important.
What does that even mean?
Well, imagine sending a letter, and it has the address on it, the content, and the instructions for the recipient, all in one package.
So it's all self-contained.
Exactly.
That's cool.
In REST, each message has all the info needed to process the request, which makes communication more efficient.
So there's no need for like going back and forth
Right.
to clarify things.
Exactly. It keeps everything streamlined.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the guide actually compares well-designed software to timeless architecture,
Oh, wow.
which I thought was such a cool analogy.
It is a really nice analogy.
Yeah.
Think about those old Roman aqueducts.
Yeah.
They still work today.
It's amazing.
Well-designed software, like RESTful systems, can adapt and stay relevant over time.
They don't become obsolete.
Exactly. Solid principles endure, regardless of the specific technologies used.
It's amazing how they were able to build those aqueducts
It really is.
back then, and they're still standing today.
It's incredible.
Those aqueducts are really a testament to good engineering.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this guy goes on to discuss operations in REST.
Like get, post, put, and delete. Are these also a part of that adaptable design?
You can think of them as like the verbs of REST,
Okay.
the actions we can perform on resources.
Okay.
So DT is like when you want to retrieve information.
Okay.
Post is for creating new resources. The T is used to like replace existing data.
Gotcha.
And delete. Well, that one's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I think we could all figure that one out.
Right.
It's kind of funny how these basic actions are like the foundation for so much of what we do online.
That's true.
From just browsing websites to like posting on social media, all of it really comes down to these actions.
Yeah. They form the core of how RESTful applications work.
Okay.
They interact with data. They manipulate data.
Gosh.
And because they're standardized, they make it possible for all these different systems to talk to each other.
So speaking of different systems,
Yeah.
the guide also mentions hypermedia as being a key element of REST.
Okay.
It sounds kind of fancy, but
what does it actually mean, like, practically?
think of it like the choose-your-own-adventure of the web.
Oh, okay.
It's all about providing links within a resource. So the user can explore related information in a dynamic way.
So instead of having like a fixed menu, it's more free-flowing and exploratory.
Exactly.
Right.
It embraces that interconnectedness of the web.
That makes sense. It makes the applications more flexible and responsive.
For sure.
Like if you're shopping online, you could browse products and then easily find related items, reviews, even videos.
Exactly.
Without having to go back to the main menu.
Exactly. Hypermedia just lets users discover and interact with information in a more natural way.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The guide gets into a lot of technical details about URIs and media types. It even has diagrams and examples.
Nice.
Which is helpful, but it's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's all important. These are the nuts and bolts that ensure that different systems can communicate clearly and consistently.
It's like learning a new language. Once you understand the grammar and vocabulary, you can start to have actual conversations.
And once you understand URIs and media types, you'll have a much better understanding of how these web services actually work.
So this guide keeps coming back to the importance of self-describing messages. Seems like a recurring theme here.
Yeah, it is a core concept in REST.
So why is that so crucial?
Well, remember how we talked about statelessness?
Yeah.
Self-describing messages are like the foundation of that.
Okay.
They ensure that each message has all the information needed without the server needing to remember any past interactions.
Yeah, okay.
This makes RESTful applications incredibly scalable and robust.
So it's like sending a letter.
Right.
That includes not just the message,
Yeah.
but also the address, the sender information,
Right.
clear instructions.
All in one neat little package.
All in one.
Right.
It makes it easy.
Each message is self-contained.
Yeah.
Which simplifies communication and reduces errors.
So how does REST make sure that these messages are understood when, like, the client and server might be using different programming languages?
That's where standardized media types come in.
Okay.
They act as a universal translator for data.
Okay.
Enabling systems built with different technologies to understand each other.
So it's like a Rosetta Stone for the web.
Exactly.
So different systems can talk.
Yeah.
Even though they have these different backgrounds.
Yeah. Media types ensure that the information being exchanged is interpreted correctly.
No matter the underlying technology.
That's right.
This guide also digs into HTTP headers and how they provide context for messages.
Right.
It's a bit technical.
Yeah, it is.
But it really highlights the detail that goes into making RESTful communication robust and reliable.
Think of HTTP headers like the behind-the-scenes crew of a play. You don't see them, but they're crucial to making sure the show runs smoothly.
So they're like the stage directions, the lighting cues, the sound effects.
Exactly. They contain all this metadata about the message.
Okay.
Like the content type, the length, caching instructions,
Gotcha.
all those details.
Correct.
Ensure that the message is delivered and interpreted correctly.
So the guide points out that these headers are well defined in REST.
Right.
So both the client and server know what's going on.
Yeah, it's all about clear communication.
Yeah.
Well-defined headers help different systems understand each other.
It's like having a shared dictionary.
Yeah.
Or a common set of rules for diplomacy.
Exactly. Without that, things can get lost in translation.
And that leads to misunderstandings.
For sure. REST prioritizes clarity and predictability in communication.
Which is super important for building reliable systems.
Absolutely.
So we're back to reliable and robust systems.
Mm-hmm.
And the guide brings up the analogy to timeless architecture again.
Oh, right.
Those Roman aqueducts.
Yeah. It's a great way to think about it.
So REST isn't just some trendy tech buzzword.
No, it's much more than that.
It's about building these lasting systems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
REST is all about building systems on solid principles that can last.
Okay.
It's an approach that focuses on simplicity,
Right.
flexibility, and longevity.
So the guide suggests that REST could even influence the design of physical objects and systems.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
I'd love to explore that.
But for now,
Yeah.
let's stick with software.
Okay.
So the guide goes on to discuss the practicalities of designing and implementing these RESTful APIs.
Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
How do we actually put these principles into practice?
So it gets into all the details of structuring URIs,
Right.
picking the right media types,
Yeah.
designing APIs that are functional and elegant.
And don't forget documentation.
Right. The documentation is super important.
Yeah, it's like a user manual for your API.
Yeah.
It helps other developers understand and use your application's data.
So this guide is like a treasure map,
I like that.
leading us through the world of REST and API design.
Yeah, it is.
But before we get too lost in the technical stuff,
Okay.
I want to go back to something we touched on earlier.
Sure.
The guide emphasizes that REST is a style,
Yeah.
not a standard.
That's an important distinction.
There's no one right way to do it.
Right. There's no single right way.
So developers have the freedom to apply these principles however they want.
Exactly. REST gives you guidelines, but leaves room for creativity.
Okay.
It's a framework for thinking about web services,
Yeah.
not a strict set of rules.
So developers can find solutions that work best for their applications.
Exactly. REST encourages developers to be creative.
And that's what makes it so powerful.
It is.
It's not one size fits all.
Right.
It can adapt to all kinds of different situations.
And that's why REST has become so dominant in web development.
Yeah.
It's all about adaptable principles that can evolve with technology.
It's like REST itself embodies the principles that it advocates for.
That's a great point.
Adaptability, resilience, evolution.
Wow, we've uncovered a whole other layer here.
Yeah.
REST is about more than just building web services.
It's about this whole philosophy of design
Exactly.
that can be used for almost anything.
It's really mind-blowing.
Yeah, this has been such an eye-opening look at REST.
It has been.
We went from the basics
Yeah.
to its philosophical foundations.
And its potential impact on other fields.
We've really only scratched the surface.
Yeah, it seems like there's always more to learn.
I'm ready for another deep dive. But before we go on another adventure,
Yeah.
let's focus on building these APIs that are both functional and elegant.
So good.
Because this guide gives some great advice on that.
Right. It talks about choosing the right URIs,
Yeah.
structuring data effectively,
Yeah.
and handling errors gracefully.
So it's all about creating APIs that are user-friendly
Exactly.
and enjoyable to work with.
Because developers are users too.
That's right. We often forget about that.
Yeah, we do.
It sounds like designing RESTful APIs is a balancing act
It is.
between being technical
Uh-huh.
and being user-centered.
It's about finding that sweet spot where functionality and aesthetics meet.
So the guide also emphasizes versioning
Yeah.
in API design,
That's important.
which seems like a small detail,
Yeah.
but I can see how it could become a huge problem
It can.
if it's not handled properly.
Versioning is all about maintaining compatibility and
Okay.
making sure that changes to your API don't break other applications.
So it's like software updates,
Right.
making sure they don't mess up older devices.
Exactly.
You've all had that happen.
Oh, yeah.
Where an app just stops working after an update.
A worst.
So versioning lets developers make changes without messing things up for existing users.
Right.
It makes for a better experience.
For sure.
The guide gives a bunch of different strategies for versioning,
Okay.
each with their own pros and cons.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
So it really depends on the specific needs of the application.
Exactly.
This has been so informative.
It has been a great discussion.
Really shedding light on all these details of REST and API design.
Yeah, we've gone from the basic principles
Mhm.
to the technical details.
To the philosophical implications.
It's been quite a journey.
I feel like I've had a bunch of aha moments.
Me too.
So before we wrap up,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Okay, let's summarize what we've learned.
Because this is the deep dive,
Right.
where we try to find the most important nuggets of knowledge.
So it was REST.
REST, or Representational State Transfer,
Right.
is all about simplicity, scalability,
Mhm.
and adaptability.
And building web
And it's a
services
set of guidelines.
that promote things like loose coupling,
Okay.
statelessness,
Uh-huh.
and a uniform interface.
Which screams?
It lets systems communicate easily
Yeah.
and evolve on their own.
And these principles have practical benefits,
Absolutely.
like being able to handle lots of users,
Yeah.
adapting to new technologies,
Right.
and building systems that last.
Exactly.
We also explored the core elements of RESTful APIs.
Yeah, from URIs and media types
Mhm.
to HTTP headers and self-describing messages.
It's a lot of technical stuff,
It is.
but it's all about clear communication
That's right.
between different systems.
And we talked about the importance of hypermedia,
Yeah.
which makes interacting with information more natural,
And we can't forget about versioning.
which helps ensure compatibility
Yeah.
as APIs change over time.
This guide has given us a great overview
It has been very helpful,
of REST and API design.
from the basics to the details.
It's been a really fascinating journey,
It has been.
filled with lots of great insights.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're just getting started.
We've only just begun to explore this.
Before we go,
Yeah.
what's one last thought
Oh.
for our listeners to ponder?
Well, we've seen how these REST principles can go beyond software.
Okay.
Could we design better systems for healthcare, education, or even government using these principles?
That's a great question.
Right.
It seems like there's so much potential there.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless.
It's amazing how REST started with web services,
Mm-hmm.
but it could have this huge impact on other things.
Right.
It shows how powerful simple ideas can be.
It really does.
Good design can go beyond just one area.
Yeah, like physics.
Okay.
It applies to bridges and airplanes.
Uh-huh.
REST can be used for all sorts of systems.
So in this deep dive,
Yeah,
we've talked about a lot,
we have.
from the basics of REST
Mm-hmm.
to how it could be used in other fields.
What do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
That's a tough one.
It is.
But if I had to pick just one thing,
Okay,
it would be that REST is all about embracing change.
that's a good one.
It's about designing systems that can adapt
Yeah,
instead of becoming outdated.
right. Especially in today's world.
Things are changing so fast.
They are.
You can't just build something that works now.
Nope.
You have to think about the future.
You got to build systems that can handle change.
Exactly.
And REST gives you the tools to do that
Okay.
by focusing on things like loose coupling and statelessness.
Mm-hmm.
REST helps you build systems that are flexible.
So it's not just about building web services.
Right.
It's about building for a future where things are constantly changing.
Exactly. REST is all about the future.
It's a way of thinking about design that's ready for anything.
It really is.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
I agree.
We learned about the technical stuff,
Uh-huh.
the philosophy behind REST.
And even how it could be used in different areas.
It's been amazing.
I've really unpacked a lot of information.
Yeah,
Hopefully we've inspired our listeners to think differently about design.
I think we have.
Simple ideas can be really powerful.
They can.
That's a good takeaway.
So as we wrap up this episode, any final thoughts for our listeners?
As you explore the world of tech,
Mm-hmm.
remember what we learned from REST.
Okay.
Embrace change, keep things simple, and design for adaptability.
The future belongs to those who are ready for anything.
Well said.
This has been another deep dive.
Thanks for listening, everyone.